This is Delicious Dignity, where we cultivate a self so potent, so clear, so vital, so truthful, that our life is all the more luscious for it. Let's call ourselves into being, shall we? Hello, lovelies. I feel like it's been a really long time since I last recorded an episode for you, and that's because it kind of has been. I recorded the last few episodes all at once, so it's been about a month since I last sat down to record one for you. And I've just been thinking about this episode for a really long time, so I'm so happy I get to deliver it to you today. You see, we've been taught that intuition is this mystical thing, that it's always there, always accessible, always flowing. And so because of that belief, when it doesn't flow, and when it is blocked and you can't hear it or you can't feel it, it makes us feel like we're somehow wrong inside or bad inside or we messed up in some way. And it can make us feel ashamed or confused, sometimes even scared and lonely. And so this is why I wanted to put this episode together because, I've even seen it in old literature. When I've read about certain devotees of goddesses or priestesses of temples, they'll proclaim that their goddess has left them and abandoned them and forsaken them. And I hear in what they're saying the same things I hear in how I feel when my intuition is just blocked, or when my client says that they can't hear their intuition. I can hear the same thing. They feel like they've been abandoned by God, but really they've self-abandoned. It's kind of like they've made self-abandonment an Olympic sport. And so we've arrived at this threshold, and it is a threshold of what to do when your intuition is blocked, because I don't want to say it's a test, but it feels like it is sometimes. It's really a test of dignity. It's almost a challenge of how much dignity can I hold in myself? And so that's the good news. If you pass through this threshold, on the other side of it, your intuition gets so much stronger. You kind of feel like a superhero in one of those Marvel movies, like you've got superpowers all of a sudden. So that's the great news. You pass through this threshold and you get to the other side in this powerful, potent way. And it's just miraculous. Okay, so this episode is all about crossing the sacred space, and it's also everything I wish I had known and had been taught when I first started my intuitive work. This episode is for those of us who've worked with our intuition for a little bit, and we found that there are times when our intuition just goes kaput. It's just silent all of a sudden. You can't hear it, you feel muddled, you just have a lot of fear that comes up when you try to access it. So I wouldn't say that this episode is really for beginners of intuition, yet at the same time, I do wish someone had taught me this when I was a beginner. I think it would have saved me a lot of self-doubt and guilt and shame and just general yuckiness. So yeah, I feel like this episode is also for beginners in that way. And by the way, I'm also doing another episode right after this on what to do when your intuition is wrong, because that's a separate threshold that we need to talk about. This episode is all about what to do when your intuition is blocked. And there's been so many times in my life when I just couldn't access my intuition. And it's a big blow to my ego and my pride because I am literally a professional intuitive. So there were a lot of times when my self-esteem was contingent upon how intuitive I was. So when I didn't have intuition, it felt like I was an imposter, or that I was lacking in integrity, that there was something wrong with me that I needed to fix. And that's where this is coming from, because I want to introduce two concepts to you that I feel like will really help you understand how to feel, what to think, and what to do when your intuition is blocked. And I think the first concept that we need to talk about is what I said before. Our belief is that intuition is this mystical thing that's always there and always accessible. And that's true, but we've mystified intuition to the point to which intuition is this word that's so mystical that we've rejected our humanity. So this is the part of acknowledging humanity within spirituality thing that I've talked about a few times on this podcast through different angles. if you dismiss your humanity, then that leads to either this purity complex or a perfectionist complex, which I think the perfectionist complex is just a purity complex with a modern font. That's what it is. And it's kind of like, oh, I don't have emotions. I don't have feelings. I always can access my intuition. And my intuition is this great thing that is just always there. And my humanity has nothing to do with it. That's that purity complex, this rejecting of all of your humanity for the sake of this mystical thing that we call intuition. And I think once you realize that subconsciously on a deeper level you've done that, then you can understand that intuition is another word or a synonym for creativity, energy, vitality. And when you see it as a synonym for those words, then you start to see the humanity of intuition. And you can, instead of saying my intuition is not working, you can say my energy is not working. My creativity is blocked. I can't hear my own vitality. And when you start to say those sentences, now you start to see what's really going on. It starts to give you a clue as to what is really going on behind the surface of why you can't hear your intuition. Now, before we go into the list of things, because in typical Dilshad fashion, I have a list of things to tell you about what to do and what you can do when your intuition is blocked. And the reason I give you this list of things is not because I want to overwhelm you with information and give you more insight. I feel like you have enough of that, but I do want to be thorough and cover it from every possible angle. Because through this episode is an evergreen episode. Everything I tell you today is going to last you a lifetime because we're covering it from every possible angle. And I've seen a lot of pop psychology and a lot of oversimplifying of information. And I think it does people a great disservice because when we don't address the complexity, it just kind of makes things flat and you can't come back to the same piece of information and relearn the same concepts in a different way. It's kind of like the fast food version of spirituality, and we don't want to do that here, at least not in this space. This way, whenever you get stuck, you can come back to this episode, re-listen to it, and you'll find something new that you didn't hear before or that applies to you in that very moment. Okay, so I have about 7 different steps that you can go through to get to the other side of the threshold of having this incredibly powerful intuition, more powerful than what you had before. Step number 1 is I want you to remember the phrase, no touchy touchy, no touchy. And that just means that what I want you to do is step number 1, drop your intuition entirely for some time. No touchy touchy of any oracle or tarot cards or any spiritual tools. No touchy touchy. Just leave it alone. Imagine this big obnoxiously red sign that says, stop, stop. Just stop everything. Stop any outside consumption. That includes social media, books, even podcasts, except for this episode. You can listen to this episode, but no outside consumption. And there's a reason why I'm saying this to you. But that's step 1. No touchy touchy, okay? Step number 2, very often we can't hear our intuition. And it's the same thing with our creativity or our vitality or our energy is because we forgot the basics. We're burnt out. We need more sleep or more food. And we haven't addressed those basics and we're burnt out because of that. We haven't rested enough. And now if you're the type of person who's going to listen to what I just said and think, but Dilshad, there are all these monks who live on very little food and sleep and they're super intuitive. First of all, pause. How do you actually know that this is what they're doing? And secondly, let me go back to the first point. How do you know that this is what they're doing? Have you met them? Have you talked to them? Have you lived with them? Do you see what they do every single day? Secondly, there's a big difference between not getting adequate sleep and rest and food from burnout than it is not getting that from living in a secluded mountaintop. If you're in a secluded mountaintop, there is a kind of protection where you're protected from everyday struggles and troubles in a way that people who don't live on a mountaintop are not protected. We go through a very different life. We need food, we need rest, we need sleep. We need to be relaxed. And if over time we have not paid attention to this, it can result in us not having the creativity, not having that juice, and not having an intuitive ability. Well, we all have an intuitive ability, but the intuition is sort of blocked. And that is why I said step number 1 is no touchy, because we don't want to have any more outside consumption because we've had enough. In a way, we kind of have to just leave it all alone and go inward. And the way to do that is stop all outside consumption. That's step number 1. And step number 2 is to just treat yourself like a precious, precious being, like a baby. Give yourself the sleep, the rest, the nutrition, the nourishment that you need. Even if you think you've done that, I promise you, sweetheart, I promise you, you have not done it. I used to think I had a perfect diet. I was eating all the time, and it turns out I had very little to no protein in my diet. And that was literally affecting my mood. I talked about this in previous episodes, but it wasn't even so much that protein was affecting my muscles at the time, because I'm still young enough to where I'm not seeing that as a result of not eating protein, but it was affecting my mood. I didn't have protein in my diet, So this is what I mean. Just like a detective, like Sherlock Holmes, channel your inner Sherlock and look around at your life and see, where have I missed the basics? Where have I not gotten enough nutrition? Where have I not gotten enough sleep? Where have I not gotten enough rest? And then once you've done that, we go on to step 3. Step 3, after you're rested, after you've stopped all outside consumption and you've sort of given yourself this break, acknowledge the block to your intuition. Don't run from it. Don't try to fix it. That's not really the attitude we're coming at it with. We're working with our intuition to figure out what is blocking us from the intuition. So for example, and this question will be very easy to answer once you've done the first 2 steps. So you're really asking your intuition, what is the block? What is the psychic hurt that is stopping you from accessing your intuition? And if you feel like you can't ask your intuition, just ask yourself, what is a psychic hurt? What am I afraid of? So if you can't do this intuitively, you can just do it through your mind. That works just as fine too. So you can say, for example, I'm really afraid that, and you can write down that statement 10 times. And you can write that statement down 10 times, a couple of times a day, or over a few days. And really what you're getting to is the fear, because there's a fear here that's blocking you from accessing your intuition. For example, there was a long period of time, a few weeks, where my intuition was silent. And I couldn't hear my intuition because of how triggered I was by something that was going to be my next chapter. Actually, what am I talking about? This was just recently this happened. It feels like it was a long time ago, but it was just recently. It was last year where I felt like my next chapter was ending in the United States and I needed to go to another country and I needed to leave the country. And I was so triggered by that I sort of shut it down. I shut everything down and I couldn't hear my intuition. And so I had to ask my intuition, what is the block preventing me from hearing you? And in this case, I heard it clearly. I heard fear, and it said fear, and I asked fear of what? Fear of being wrong. And this is something that is it's like my Achilles heel. This fear of being wrong blocks me from accessing my intuition, because what if I listen to my intuition and then I'll be wrong? And so then I just cut off my access to intuition completely. And so that's how I addressed my fear. That's how I figured out what my fear was. But you can figure it out in the other ways I mentioned to you before, too. You can just blanket statements, write down what you're so afraid of. And you sort of journal on this fear over and over again until it's gone, or until you can feel that the messiness or the ickiness of the fear has gone. Maybe the fear is still there, but it's not as loud as it was before. Some books that really help with this, by the way, not to give you more tasks to do, but if you are interested in reading books on this, there are 2 books. One is called Writing Down Your Soul, and the other one is called Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. And Writing Down Your Soul is by Janet Connor. These are 2 books that are really useful for journaling about blocks and really getting into the habit of understanding your own mind and letting your mind have a field day and telling you all the things that it's really upset about. And for me, as an example, when I figured out, okay, I'm afraid of being wrong. So then I would ask in my journal or in my writing or just sitting and contemplating it on my own, I would ask, what's so bad about being wrong? What's so bad about being wrong? So like, let's say, for example, what's so bad about being wrong? Well, what's so bad about being wrong is that I will make a mistake and it will cost me a lot of money. What's so bad about it costing a lot of money? Well, if it costs me a lot of money, then I won't have enough money to live and I would have to get a job, blah, 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 blah. Well, what's so bad about that? And you just keep going down the list of what's so bad about that and keep journaling about it until that fear sort of leaves you. Again, you're not trying to fix anything. You're just coming at it with curiosity. The 4th step in this process is to do some kind of energy release work. Now, this is for all the energies and issues you can't access, but also to address the energies and issues you can access. Sometimes we don't have names for things. Sometimes we can just feel it. So that's when you do energy release work. And one day, I promise you, I will make a course on energy release work, but I'm going to assume you have some kind of cleansing practice of your own that can work for you. So do it for a few days. Now, this could be something as simple as prayer or going to a Reiki practitioner or I don't know, whatever your cleansing practice is, because if I had to mention some of mine, it would take up a few hours. And one day I will make the course, I promise. But energy release work is super important because we live in a world where our psyches are being constantly bombarded by the world around us in a way that has never been done before. We have access to so much information, and even if we don't engage with that information, we'll hear about it through the other people around us or through the environment around us. So it's a constant bombardment. And if you think about this, we have hygiene for everything. We have hygiene for brushing our teeth. We shower every day, but we don't have the same hygiene mentality for our spirit. We somehow think that it's just going to exist for all perpetuity without any kind of love and assistance and just help with removing the caca, removing the stuff that doesn't need to be there. And so energy release work is a super, super important life skill, and it can come after the first 3 steps that we did. A simple way that I can tell you right now that's a quick one is to just shower with sea salt. So you dissolve sea salt in water and you pour it over your head and you pour it over your body. And you do this whenever you shower for about a week. And for some reason that helps me. Maybe it will help you too. And again, one day I will do an in-depth course on this. But suffice to say, look it up online or just do an energy release practice that you know of. Oh, you know what? I just remembered. Episode 31, when we were doing the New Year rituals, there was an episode on release, liberate, and unbind, where we were releasing 2025 and going into 2026. How could I have forgotten this? We did talk about a few energy release practices in there. So I would go back and listen to that episode and see what practice you can pick up if you didn't like the practices I mentioned here. But definitely step 4 is all about energy release work. Step 5. Step 5 is your creative practice. There was another period of my life when I couldn't hear my intuition, and that was because I was living in a house with a few people who were just very anxious, very traumatized people. And I ended up entering into a romantic relationship with one of them. And then add the lockdown from COVID on top of all of this, and it was just a mess. my emotions were all over the place. My energy was all over the place. And of course, I couldn't hear my intuition, right? And I had to repeatedly go into nature. I had to repeatedly go into the backyard because I could barely stay in the house. And one of the things that came out of going into the backyard is that I just, on a whim, started designing jewelry out of nowhere. And I started plugging into my intuition to create these gorgeous, deeply meaningful designs, which ended up now being translated into a sacred tattoo offering that I have on my website. That led to so many things. And from that designing jewelry, it also led to me designing my own tattoos, which I now have tattooed on my body. It just got me flowing again. That creative practice of designing jewelry just got me flowing again, and I could hear my intuition again. So sometimes doing something that's a synonym for intuition, like creativity, can bring you closer to your intuition. So maybe you take a pottery class. Maybe you learn how to braid hair. Maybe you just finger paint. It doesn't have to be this big deal, but having a creative practice can really help with you getting back into a delicious kind of intimacy with yourself, which then leads you to go into intuition, which is just radical intimacy with yourself. And so along with step 5, which is creative practice, like I said, you could do a synonym for intuition, which is energy, vitality. So maybe you take supplements for vitality just for a little while. Something like St. John's wort is a supplement. Now, obviously, I'm not a doctor or whatever, but these are some supplements, herbal remedies that you can use to bring back your vitality. St. John's wort is really good for that. There are other herbs and teas that you could drink. You can refer back to the episode I did with Brenna Lilly, who is a herbalist, and her episode was specifically about herbalism for sensuality and nervous system resilience. And that was episode 29, and she recommends a few herbs there if you'd like to go and look at that. You're basically getting vitality back into your body, which will eventually help you to re-listen, to be able to access your intuition. Another synonym for intuition is energy. So you're getting energy back into your body. You're oxygenating. Is that even a word? But you're bringing oxygen to your cells. One of the ways in which you can do that is strength training at the gym. Again, you don't have to do this for the rest of your life, but maybe you go do a strength training at the gym 2 or 3 times a week for about a month, or maybe just for 10 days. And so that way you are addressing the synonyms for intuition, which will eventually help you with accessing your intuition again. Can you see the brilliance of this? It's so brilliant. Okay, so step 6, try small decisions and small asks of your intuition. So now that you've sort of come into step 5, you finish step 5, now we can try small decisions and small asks like, what do I want to eat today, intuition? Where would you like me to go for coffee? What should I drink off this menu? These are small asks that you can ask of your intuition. Or, hello, intuition, what would you like me to do today? What is one thing you'd like me to do today? Small asks, low risk, low effort asks. And that will kind of get you back in the zone again. And step 7, talk with a mentor. I know it sounds like I'm biased because I'm one of those people that people talk to, but there's only so much you can do alone. We need each other. And a mentor will often have more experience than you, is more qualified than you, and if nothing else, can see things from another perspective because we all have our blind spots. So don't be afraid to talk with someone about these things, especially if you have identified the psychic heart and you're kind of like, well, now where do I go, or how can I move through this? This is when a mentor will really come in handy. And so those are the 7 steps, my lovelies. Do you see how kind you're being to yourself? Instead of being mean or cruel or strong-arming your intuition, you're working with your humanity. Rather than dismissing your humanity or treating it like it's an inconvenient thing or thinking you've been abandoned by God, you're actually just being kind to yourself. This is the way of dignity. This right here is the way of dignity. Now, I will have in the ritual guide attached to this episode in the description, I will have in there a little graphic for you to download off the website, and it will give you the 7 steps. So you can just have it on your phone. Maybe I'll even put it up on my Instagram. And that way you have easy access to it when it does happen, and you can just sort of check it off the list and go through the 7 steps. I guarantee you go through these 7 steps in that order with that much sincerity. I swear to you, I guarantee you will start listening to your intuition again. And you'll hear it pretty strongly in a way you've never heard it before. And it's so exciting when that happens, because it's like you've reached a new level of your own humanity. And it's a beautiful feeling. I want everyone to experience that at least once in their lifetime. Like I said, you pass through this threshold, your intuition gets stronger. You're basically choosing love over fear, gentleness over force, power over force. This is dignity in action. And that's the episode. So by the way, if you like this episode, you might also like episode 16, which is how to read oracle cards for yourself when you're full of doubt. Excellent episode, because I talk about this really scientific way of reading oracle cards. And like I said, the next episode will be on what to do when your intuition is wrong, which is different from this episode where it's just simply not working or it's blocked. I so enjoyed giving you what I wish someone had given me when I first started. The little girl in me is dancing. The adult woman in me is excited for you and wants to see what you do with this. The sassy grandma in me is nodding her head with this sacred kind of knowing, like, yes, this is good. So I'm just really happy to have shared this with you. And if you have more questions or there's something I didn't address, please let me know. You can now text me, like I said, and I won't even have your number when you text me. The way to text me is in the description of this episode. You just shoot me a text and I will answer your questions in the next episode. I just wanted to make it easier on you to get in touch with me and share your thoughts. And I thought this was such an excellent way of doing it. And so, my lovelies, may working with your intuition pull you into a deeper relationship with your dignity. And I have another blessing, a 2-for-1 here. May you realize that working with your intuition is just another avenue, is just another excuse for you to work with your dignity. Much love to you. Until next time. Bye.